cold today.
It's got windy and blustery. It's supposed to, tomorrow morning's commute's not gonna be fun, I hear.
No, and it's probably be a delay, right?
This is what I'm waiting to have Jason online do on Facebook, make his forecast from Florida.
His are good, even though he's.
We'll probably get a text in the
He's
middle.
very good.
Does anybody have 7 o'clock?
6:58.
Okay,
It's 8 o'clock in Puerto Rico, I think.
we're late.
Jeff already did the meeting.
There you go, he did already.
We missed it.
I just can't imagine Jeff coming back very tan.
Maybe burnt on the top of his head.
Right, it'll
Stop
show
it,
on the
that's
next meeting.
terrible.
I hope he's using sunscreen.
Okay. Hey, Kenneth.
1 minute.
All right, 1 minute, Ken.
So what did one candle say to the other candle?
What did one candle say to the other candle?
Are you going out tonight?
It's always got the levity, that's
There
my
we
man.
go.
These meetings have really changed
Ooh.
over the past year.
The sign, it says.
This right side is
video
heavily
streaming
weighted.
not employed. Does that mean it's not actually working tonight, or?
Sorry?
Is video streaming not in progress?
Not exactly,
Oh,
What was that?
having a technical
not
issue?
exactly.
Okay.
That means no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ah, what did I put my name on?
I'd like to call the Thursday, January 5th Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you all for coming, board and members of the public. I'd like to add 2 things to the agenda, if I could have a motion. Arthur O'Neill has an update, as does Pierce Hollow Village. So do I hear a motion?
So moved?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. I'm going to add it now. Arthur, would you like to go first, please?
Sure.
Okay. There's only one of you and lots of them.
Just a couple of things. First of all, you probably read in the newspapers, and I think the First Selectman put it on the website, Facebook page for the town. There have been some reductions in educational aid coming to Southbury. Excuse me. These are probably the first of a series of these kinds of reductions. I've been warning, and I think you've been listening and acting in accordance with the warnings that I've been bringing to you about not to count on this money that the state was cranking into the budget because our finances were in a fairly precarious position. And unfortunately, this has turned out to be the case, and we're starting to see these reductions. For those who did not hear the governor's speech yesterday at the opening of the General Assembly, he was talking about needing to deal with the fundamental problems the budget has. It's a $1.5 billion deficit this year, a $1.5 billion deficit the year after, and similar kinds of deficits going forward as far as the eye can see, or as far as our computers can predict. And so the governor's talking about making reductions in one particular area that has been largely untouched, and that is aid to municipal and local governments. That includes education aid, which is in the neighborhood of about $4 billion altogether, and about $1 billion of aid that is non-education aid that goes to municipalities. And the general principle that he articulated as the basis for how they were going to try to reshuffle this money to make it as effective as possible and do the most good, the biggest bang for the buck and that sort of thing, was to move money around so that less money is going to go to what are deemed to be affluent communities, and more money is going to go to communities that are deemed to be needy and really need the money and therefore would be in really serious trouble if they got less state aid. Based on what we've just gone through and what I've been seeing and hearing, the conversations, the drift of them, what you need to understand is, in effect, this means you. That there's going to be less aid coming to municipalities like Southbury than has been in the case, I think, in the past. Certainly there won't be any new money with the budget deficits projected the way they are. And so when you're formulating your budget, I'm again making the same warning, only louder and larger, that you don't count on money from the state of Connecticut, at least not to the same extent. At an absolute minimum, count on zero basing. Don't assume there's going to be any increases, even though a formula might say you're supposed to get something, and you should anticipate some reductions. I read where the chairman of the Board of Finance, John Michael, said that this in fact has been kind of a guiding principle, not to count on that state money, and therefore Southbury's in better shape. But it's going to get much worse. So that's the general thing, and if I get more detailed information saying where it's going to happen, I will let you know as soon as I can, so that you can anticipate what you need to do with your own budgets, both in the current fiscal year, but also the one that starts July 1 as well, because both of these things are going to be subject to, I think, some fairly surprising and significant reductions in monies that you used to get, or we're counting on or hoping for. Second thing is that I had gotten a request earlier, and it's terrible, I cannot remember your IT person's name.
Ray.
Mather.
Ray Mather, and it regards body cameras. And the request had been put into OPM. I don't know if he actually filed an application for the money. But OPM had said, apparently in an informal sort of way, that Southbury was ineligible to receive funding for the body cameras. And I had requested some research to be done on this subject, because the statute doesn't say that towns like Southbury are ineligible. And in fact, the legislative history, when you look at the debate on the floor of the House of Representatives, the person who brought out the bill, Representative Tong from Stamford, was specifically asked, would this money be available to towns that are run by a resident state trooper, where the police force is resident state trooper based? And the answer was yes. Unfortunately, there is a Supreme Court case that basically says that if you are not an organized municipal police department, then you are not considered to be a police department, a local police department. There's an equation was made between these two different phrases, and the phrase that was used in the statute was, I believe, a local law enforcement agency. Let me see if I can find the exact words. An organized police force, which is what the statute specifically talks about for general purposes, and a municipal police department. The phrase municipal police department was what was used in the statute that provided for the body camera funding. And so that's what OPM is basing their decision on, that they're saying Southbury is ineligible for this kind of funding. I think, seems to me you don't think that that's stretching, or you think it's stretching the words to try to cover things that I agree. I think if we had a no budget deficit, probably OPM wouldn't be looking for ways to twist and turn to avoid sending money if they could. So that's, I think, underlying driver here. And they've got some language, though, in a Supreme Court case that gives them a leg to stand on. Obviously, I'm going to try to see if we can get that changed, but in the context of the budget, anything like that is going to be a more difficult effort to make. So I thought I would update you on that. I just got this information a couple of days ago, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Mr. Mather, but since I was coming here tonight, I thought I'd let you folks know that was the response that I got. Initially, looking at the floor debate, it looked pretty good. for the town. But then when you look at the Supreme Court case, OPM seems to have some credible basis. At least they're not going to back off until somebody pushes them hard. Let's see. So there may be other things, and I don't know if I'm still under public comment, but if there's something that you folks want done, you should know that the deadline for me filing a bill as a proposed bill, as an individual legislator proposed bill, is the 13th, Friday the 13th. So a week from tomorrow. So I still have time to do stuff. So if there's something that you want done on behalf of or for the town, please let me know about that. I guess there's one other thing that's kind of cropped up a little bit. It's the library board. Have you folks discussed that, the issue that they raised?
Yeah, we're not going to.
Okay.
Thank you. But quick follow-up. Is there any way to put in something that allows us to get the body cameras before the 13th?
Yeah. I mean, I can put in the legislation, but you understand this would then go to the budget through the budget process. It would get dragged back into that. But definitely I will do
Something
that.
to consider. Just as a point, back to your very first point, is there any indicator that we're going to get a new formula for the ECS? Other than that, we're not going to get as much, or possibly lots less?
I think that is very much up in the air because so much money is involved. Any new formula would have with it winners and losers and changes, and given everything that we've got as a problem in terms of total funding, that would be very difficult to come by. It should, because of the court decision that came down from Judge McAusher, which is under appeal, but still people think that we should start to try to address this issue and not wait until the Supreme Court tells us we've got 90 days or something to react. And then we have to have a special session and do everything in a clap of thunder kind of situation.
Was there any additional conversation about the going to 100% for the police, for the state police program?
That has not come up specifically, but given that, if you think of the towns, while there are some towns in eastern Connecticut that are resident state trooper towns that have almost the same poverty rate as Hartford, most resident state trooper towns are not in that category. So, if you do something about the resident state trooper that costs towns more and costs the state less, it's mostly going to fall on what they deem to be affluent towns. So I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that popping up as a proposal.
It might be prudent to plan that way.
On the body cameras, the language you said they use municipal police department, whatever the language is in the statute, is that a defined term in the statute somewhere, or is this just from the Supreme Court?
Unfortunately, the Act does not define municipal police.
Is it defined elsewhere in the?
No.
So this is just a Supreme Court decision that happened to define it in some other context?
Unrelated to this whole subject of body cameras, it equated organized police force, organized, let's see, what's the right phrase here? Municipal police department is the one that was used in the statute, and an organized police force, which is under Connecticut General Statutes 29-5. So that's what's in the statutes that tries to say, well, this is what a police force is, organized municipal police force, an organized police force. And then when the phrase municipal police force gets tossed in at least one case, and if you want, I can see if I can get to the name, said that those two terms are synonymous. They can be used interchangeably. It's Ganeski versus East Line, 275 Connecticut, 246, page 288. And if you've got LexisNexis here, well, you can.
Just might. Okay, so, but there was debate on it, and the
was a
intent
debate on the
was to
floor.
include it. So is there a way is there a process to challenge OPM's decision? To provide this additional information about the
Court.
legislative history? Short of court.
Or,
Propose a new bill.
Or the court of the legislature as a way to try to get them to back off on that. Because obviously, their interpretation of it is very different from what the legislator who brought it out explained it to mean. And based on that, and based on the way legislative history gets construed, not always, but the judge should look at it and say, well, but in this particular case, they were specifically addressing this issue. It wasn't the general concept of how these terms might get used. They were using it and they intended it to apply to resident state trooper towns. That should be the outcome. But judges don't always do what I think they should.
Any other questions for Arthur?
No.
Thank you, Arthur.
Thanks, Arthur.
Good evening. My name is Joel Abramson. I'm Vice President of Pierce Hollow Village, and I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to bring you an update on what's been going on. This town has been so helpful to us, and we appreciate this opportunity. But before I begin, I'd like to introduce some of my colleagues on the Board of Directors. When I mention your name, will you stand up? Laney Jedlinski, Jack. Yeah, Jack.
Living together for 4 years.
Jack Muscolino. June Bennett. Reverend Marshall Price. Why am I tongue-tied? Mark Burns. Rudy Zaida. And Joe Huckheiser. Our president, Reverend Fred McGee, is out of town. His plane just didn't get here on time. I'd like now for Laney Jedlinski to step up and tell you just where we are and what's been going on.
Hi, thank you for having us here. You don't have to take big notes because you're each going to get exactly what I'm reading to you. However, I want you to listen so you don't get it ahead of time. The Pierce Hollow Village project was created and developed for 180 units of desperately needed affordable elderly housing. 60 in each of 3 phases on the 45 acres to be conveyed to the town from the state, just for this purpose. We regret to advise you that our application for funding from the Department of Housing has technically been approved by the Commissioner, Yvonne Klein, of Department of Housing, but only under conditions that Pierce Hollow Village cannot possibly meet. The fact that the conveyance of the land and the lease to Pierce Hollow Village requires that the land be used for affordable senior housing as specified by State Law Special Act 1323 did not convince Commissioner Klein to approve our application in a manner that would allow us to move forward at present. As the way forward to meet our mutual goals, the Board of Directors of Pierce Hollow Village recommends that the Board of Selectmen, you guys, accept the land for the town as stated in the legislation and hold the land until there are changes at the Department of Housing and/or at the federal level, at which time our senior affordable housing project can move forward. The following brief background sketches out our efforts that may be helpful to the Board of Selectmen in reviewing our recommendation. Representatives of Pierce Hollow Village came to you on October 20th last year. It says here this year, but it was last year, for a letter of support to go to the Department of Housing requesting that Southbury's demographics and wishes of our town be considered and that an exception be made in the scoring of future funding applications. Such an exception would allow Pierce Hollow Village to be competitive in funding by Department of Housing. Letters were sent by you, the Board of Selectmen, and also by Representative Arthur O'Neill, Senator Rob Kane, and Congresswoman Elizabeth Esty. As noted, the Department of Housing pre-development loan application was submitted, but it really wasn't approved. As the main rationale for this decision, the Department of Housing noted its concern that the structure of the proposal for low-income seniors only will make it very difficult for this application to score well under either the CHAFA 9% low-income housing tax credit or the Department of Housing CHAMP round. These are the major funding sources required to build a complex. The Department of Housing has indicated that our proposal would have difficulty scoring well, based on the units being restricted to the elderly, the lack of deep income targeted units, the lack of 2 and 3 bedroom units, and the fact that there is no availability of mass transit. The October 20th letter you sent to the Department of Housing Commissioner, Yvonne Klein, provided Pierce Hollow Village with the opportunity for an appointment with the Commissioner. We were able to see her to discuss our application face to face. This was very important. Thus, Department of Housing Commissioner Klein, the Deputy Commissioner Lundgren, Reviewer Ed LaChance, 2 representatives from the Women's Institute for Housing and Economic Development, who are our consultants, and 2 representatives from Pierce Hollow Village met in December. Commissioner Klein stated her concerns about the project's ability to secure funding as previously stated. The state's priorities for funding are apparently for family housing, not exclusively elderly housing projects. The Department of Housing has examined the need in the state and set its priorities to address this through the development of family-focused housing, which may include seniors. The state is concerned with trying to retain individuals and families in Connecticut. The Department of Housing will not grant exceptions to any individual town. Pierce Hollow Village was given the opportunity to state its case, which included Southbury's demographics, that we have the highest percentage of elderly in the state, the long wait list at Grace Meadows, our senior housing, of 4 to 5 years. And that's not counting those who don't even bother to apply because of the wait. We have superior minibus system for seniors, making up for the lack of mass transit. The value that of the land we would be given is $3 to $4 million. We've received superior support through zoning changes and resolutions by this Board of Selectmen. We have strong alignment there exists strong alignment between Pierce Hollow Village's plan with the town's plan of conservation and development. Notwithstanding our arguments, the Commissioner did not change her position. We should point out that Department of Housing was willing to grant Pierce Hollow Village a pre-development loan, but only if we provide a guarantee of repayment backed by assets that Pierce Hollow Village does not have. The loan would be due in 2 years, issued at a 0% interest rate. There would be no exceptions to the applications for the low-income housing tax credits or the Department of Housing CHAMP funding. Thus, the current scoring process virtually removes any chance of Pierce Hollow Village receiving the funding for construction. The Department of Housing is also requiring strong evidence of site control. We note that Pierce Hollow Village's board's willingness to guarantee that we would do our very best to see that the project was completed is not sufficient for the Department of Housing. However, the fact that we have no ability to get the loan guaranteed is only part of the problem. Having the loan guaranteed with no real chance of getting the other funding would, we believe, be both counterproductive and wasteful. The options as to a path forward appear to us as 1, wait until hopefully the Department of Housing and/or the federal priorities change. This option would call for the town to accept the parcel of land as stated in the legislation and hold on to it until there are changes in priorities at the Department of Housing and/or the federal level, at which time senior affordable housing could move forward. Number two, have the legislation changed to allow for intergenerational affordable housing with 2- and 3-bedroom apartments. This option would mean starting all over again from the beginning. It would also mean a change in the mission of Pierce Hollow Village, which Pierce Hollow Village is not prepared to do. The town of Southbury could accept the property to be used for housing that is not earmarked for seniors. Doing this would also not involve PHV as a developer, meaning the town would develop its own Department of Housing and move forward with that. As of today, the Pierce Hollow Village Board of Directors is at an impasse with the Department of Housing. But we're hoping that that the Board of Selectmen will take a careful look at option 1, as I just read to you, as a possible direction for Pierce Hollow Village and the town to take. The Board of Directors of Pierce Hollow Village is extremely grateful to you for your staunch support. Thank you.
So option 1 is to just hold the land,
Hold the land.
take the land and kind of hold it in reserve for,
It would have to be conveyed to the town.
right?
However, that's not without issues. The main one being that on the land are about a dozen or 18 cottages, which Southbury Training School has reported to me have been vandalized somewhat with broken glass and so on. So the town would have that responsibility, and it's not an insignificant responsibility, either to raise the cottages or to put an armed guard there 24 hours a day. Or
Complicated then.
it's not.
It's not just
none
a
of
piece of
this-
land that you can just kind of let lie fallow for some future use. It has to be dealt with.
Something has to be done pretty quick, yeah. Otherwise, it would be kind of a slam dunk.
Firstly, I'd like to say to the board, thank you for all your efforts in trying to make this come to fruition. Secondly, I wish we could act tonight and give you a concrete response as to the next steps for us. But without Jeff, we can't do that. So we'll have to wait till Jeff returns. But I thank you for keeping us in the loop, and Godspeed for the next steps. Thank you. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say or ask?
I don't,
Yeah,
My-
I have one tiny little thing I forgot to add, that we have met several times with Representative Arthur O'Neill and explored a number of options for us through legislation and proposals and so on, and he's been fantastic, but at this point, it doesn't seem appropriate to put in a
Bill?
a bill.
Any form of
Right.
Thanks, Lane.
I was looking for the special act, but I can't find it right now. The one question I have is, I recall that the special act said something like, if it's not used for this purpose, it reverts back to the state. Is there a time frame in there? Because you're asking us to take it and just hold it for some indefinite period of time, and I think that's sort of be an open legal question as to whether the act allows us to do that.
The act doesn't say anything, there is no time frame listed in the act. The town can take it to use for housing purposes. It doesn't say senior housing, and if the town takes it and uses it, you can lease it to us to put up, or to a nonprofit, to put up low-income senior housing, and that's allowable. Other than that, it goes back to the state. Those two.
Okay, so we'll have to look at that.
Is that it? Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, next item on the agenda is public comments. Would anybody like to come forth and? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed. You guys have all had a chance to look at the announcements and correspondence. Any questions, feedback? No? Okay, moving along to the consent agenda. I believe all of you were mailed the information on the new hire for the senior center coordinator position. Does anybody object to putting that in with consent agenda? Just so I can pull it out? Otherwise, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, minutes of the December 15th regular meeting. I guess I should start looking at stuff.
Make a motion to approve?
Okay,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Great. All right, minutes of the December 21st meeting.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain.
Wasn't
You
here.
abstain.
Wasn't there.
Got that? That's right. Okay, right.
Missed a great meeting.
It looks like it was one of the
It's
best.
very long. It's a very long
Got a lot
meeting.
done.
Okay, this brings us to our next item on the agenda, which is unfinished business, and we have the banner policy.
I think it's best to leave that to the next meeting. Jeff Tinley emailed Mike and I and Cindy right before the meeting, and there was some correspondence back and forth, so there's still some open issues on some issues raised at the last meeting. So motion to postpone it to the next meeting.
And I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Amendments to the ethics ordinance. Jason?
Joe Ranchero emailed Jennifer and I this afternoon. Jeff Tinley's made some revisions, mostly to the definition section, so Joe's looking at it, and we were going to meet with Joe and go through it, and then bring it back to the board at one of our next meetings. So motion to postpone that to a future meeting.
Second?
This next meeting is going to be a good one.
All in favor?
Aye.
No update for the tax relief at this time?
No, I'm looking to schedule, I'm sending out emails this week to schedule a meeting, hopefully in first week of February, second week of February.
Great. Okay, that brings us to our next item, the Senior Center Operational Manual. You all have been provided a copy of it. Tamith is here to answer any questions she may have on it. You've also received her report. Does anybody have any questions of Tamith? Does anybody have any feedback to the manual?
Has the manual been reviewed by town council?
Yes.
That's my only question.
Did he have any changes? Or?
Yeah, did he make any changes?
Actually,
We have been presented with what he reviewed, correct? We have received what he reviewed.
yes.
Okay, so he signed
So
it.
you have it as reviewed by council.
And this is the same one that was the same. Nothing's changed since our last meeting.
Just a couple of minor changes. We have had an issue with people on the premises before hours and after hours, so you'll notice in the first paragraph of the manual that there's specific language stating that without authorization from either the Director of Senior Services or the Director of Park and Rec, special permission for before or after hours, no one's permitted on the premises. And I believe that's it. I think that's the only change that we added. Oh, and I know the summer hours, the summer hours, I was asked to remove those.
Discretionary.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So it's, we did add, subject to change, and, Jason, I think it might have been your suggestion to put that we're held to certain standards as employees within the, senior center manual. Or by employees, I don't know if it was you that had said it, so I thought it was you, but now I'm thinking maybe it happened in the commission meeting,
I think it did.
Jennifer.
Yeah,
All right.
I think-
Sounds like a
So
great
you'll
idea.
notice that there was something added to there, and so you may have already seen that, but it just basically
was in the
states that
first draft.
employees are held to a certain standard just by virtue of the employment with the town of Southbury.
I had just a few little things, edits. Could we put the telephone number for the senior center on the front of the manual? Just,
Oh, absolutely. I will let you know that one of the things that I discovered when I started going through some of our closets, there was an incredible amount of the most beautiful folders that had been made up and spent good money on, along with magnets and pens. And I believe it's Amanda Hadcraft who's come in very, very part-time after hours to assist us in keeping everything going before the new coordinator's hired. And so I envision us utilizing those in conjunction with the manual there's no reason that they should be in a closet collecting dust, and they have a great, use
Right.
in our promotion of this manual to members as well as we greet new members. So that has the number there.
Okay,
and-
that's what I thought you were going with that, okay.
Yes, but absolutely, we can certainly add that. That's not a problem at all.
Another comment was, with under handicap parking spaces, it says basis for the person whose name appears on the required handicap parking permit. Does it always appear on the parking permit? What if it's a temporary one, it doesn't have it?
I'm gonna
We
be
might-
very honest with you, I pulled that particular verbiage came from the Wallingford one, the Wallingford manual.
Because I've had temporary ones for my various ailments, and it didn't have my name on it. So I would hate to
That's a
prohibit
good
somebody.
point. I can certainly just remove the specificity about the name being on the
Yes.
permit. I can definitely do that.
Thank you. And then my last thing was, on page 12, and it just says call for rides. Maybe if we put the phone number right there, it would just make it easier for
Oh,
somebody to-
sure, we can do that. We can add that phone number on page 12.
Yeah, under bus reservation policies and procedures. Otherwise,
We
Tamara, I
ha-
think it's exceptional.
Okay, oh, well, thank you very much.
Comprehensive and very thorough.
Yep, we can definitely do that. We actually, page 12, just
Right underneath bus reservation policies and procedures?
seniors are required to contact dispatch 262-0652 as soon as they become aware of a cancellation. So it's a little further down.
Right, it's a little further down.
So you want it added,
To the top,
To
to the
the
very
top,
first line.
sure,
Just
no
because
problem.
they don't know if they're supposed to call dispatch. So this, maybe
Absolutely.
just say, reiterate it there.
can definitely do that.
And other than that, anybody else have any more comments,
Just,
feedback, questions?
Just a general question, I mean, does this help you get accreditation through that program you were looking
It's,
at?
I knew that question was gonna come up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Actually, no. You know, what's really interesting is that finally things are starting to settle a little bit for me to really be able to start to explore accreditation. And I really would like to make a comprehensive presentation to you, and it doesn't have to be done holding you up in a meeting. It can be done certainly, electronically. It can release something over to you. I'm just starting to scratch the surface with that. There's some phone calls I'd like to make, but basically with accreditation, what I have been able to research so far is it can be upwards of a 3-year process.
Oh, my goodness.
There is a financial obligation on our part.
That was my next question.
Yes,
yeah,
there
if
is.
there was
There's,
any money involved.
the start-up cost would be $500 is from what I am discovering so far. And like I said, I've only scratched the surface, so forgive me for not having, fully prepared information. But certainly that would be the start to gain the full guidebook. The premise really of the whole thing is putting together a full notebook that's tabbed, and one of them is to have a membership manual as well as several other
So
documents.
that is one of the
and-
requirements of the,
Pardon me?
that, the membership manual is one of the requirements.
Yes, it
yeah.
is. And, when you look at accreditation and just the meaning of that word usually in the process, self-reflection and making yourself as superior as you can with what you're providing. So, yeah, the membership manual is certainly part
So
of
there's
it.
probably like corrective action, feedback loops that have to be created and,
I keep
documented.
reminding myself as
Yeah,
we
I've
take
been
on
through
these
those
cumbersome
kinds of things.
tasks, it will
Yeah.
lead to
Okay.
ultimately accreditation. And I will say too that, from what I've looked at so far, there's nothing that would stop us from enacting and doing many of the things that are within those different guidelines of accreditation. So whether we decide we want to make the time and the financial investment, I won't stop in my
yeah,
commitment
you can
in
still do
doing
those
everything
things
we
and
can.
make the department a
Absolutely.
better function.
Absolutely.
Tabitha, I just had a couple other edits that I'll just point them out, and then I'll give you this, and you can have it if you
that would
want.
be great. Thank you.
On senior services miscellaneous on page 18, it says fax and machine copier use.
Mm-hmm.
It says the word use of the fax machine and copier is forbidden. I was thinking maybe not permissible, a little nicer, but,
Sure, yeah,
just
we can definitely do that. We can definitely do
touchy.
that. And
Sound like a
just
marketer now.
It's a mark-
well, just for clarification
You're
for
so
all
nice,
of you as
Jennifer.
well.
It wasn't yours, it
It's
was-
certainly able to be utilized by seniors if it's program related. If, it's a bridge group and they need to, I don't know how those games are played, but they all have scorecards and,
You can
so.
just say
May not be permissible.
It may not be permissible, or
Sure.
it's
I'll
not
write
permissible
that.
without prior permission.
Sure.
And then underneath it says senior service phone is not for use of non-senior services. I thought you meant by. So,
Okay, perfect.
and that's it. I give you this, and you can have it, and
Great.
you can do
I don't
whatever you
think we don't need to vote on that.
want. We do need to vote on
We
this.
do?
So I need a resolution to approve this.
Now, can I just ask a question of all of you? As I've noticed in some of your documents and things that you have approved, you usually have some kind of language or verbiage that goes in the lower right-hand corner of the document, so.
we could, if we vote on it tonight, if we resolve to accept it tonight, you would just,
I would just
on the
note
bottom,
that
it
on
would
the
say,
bottom.
approve Board of Selectmen to today's date.
Perfect, okay, great.
Is that right, Mary?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so I hear a motion to
I'll
approve.
make a motion to approve the document as submitted.
Second.
Well, with,
With changes.
with changes discussed.
Well,
No.
you got to second it, right? Don't we have
Okay,
to first?
sorry about that.
Okay. Go ahead, start over.
I'll make a motion to approve the document as submitted with edits as discussed and approved by the group.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great job, and great
Good
job
job.
on the
Yeah,
party.
that's
Thank
great.
you.
Oh, thank you. I will actually forward to the First Selectman's office, I'll forward the finished documents so that you have it. And then just by way of information for all of you, I'll certainly be bringing forward to the Senior Commission, and we'll look for rollout after that. I'd like to do that as a courtesy for the commissioners. So, thank you very much. for your
Thank you very
support.
much, Tom.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda. George, do you have any updates from?
I do, actually, and I didn't write them up this time.
Oh,
so
darn.
I'm sorry, I'll give it a few words, but the most interesting thing I participated in, actually it was a couple days ago, was the facility utilization study for the schools. Very intense meeting, lasted about an hour and a half, a lot of good discussion. I think something's going to come out of this group. There's a very detailed plan of action. The
With an
work is
associate,
being,
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry?
with an associated time frame, because it seemed to be a couple of years the last time we
One,
talked about
well,
it.
it's 1 year is the
Okay.
target, but I think it's going to happen sooner.
Okay.
Malone and McBroom is kind of like guiding us through the process, and they're going to be doing most of the hard work, the actual projections. It starts with projections, enrollment projections, and how they're going to, how the enrollment will change in the future. Then it follows with a capacity and utilization study of the facilities, like what are they doing with the space they have? Is there extra space? Or, what could be done with some of the space? And what condition is the space in? Is it old? Is it needing a lot of work? Or is it sort of acceptable? Then they go through a scenario planning process where they come up with different scenarios and they get scored or rated, like say you want to combine grades here or move some people over there. It could be 3, 4, 5 scenarios. It could be any number of those. Then you do a little refinement and make some recommendations. I mean, in the end, it's the Board of Education that makes all the final decisions. People like myself and some of the other members are just there to advise and comment. But it looks like it was a good group. A lot of intelligent people, a lot of articulate people. I think it'll do something. I think something will happen.
What's the demographic of the committee? Are there parents, are there older
Yeah.
people, younger people? Yeah?
There's parents, 2 principals, Keith McLiberty, is that his last name?
Financial guy?
Is there, I don't know, I mean, Ed St. John, I can't remember everybody's name, but there's a big mix. Ed St. John is there. We
Okay.
have a member from our, Bob, I can't remember his last name, from the board.
From Board of Finance, Bob
Yeah,
Langley?
yeah, he's on it. The 2 people from Malone and McBroom who've been through this before, so this is not like
Great.
their first rodeo.
Okay.
It was a good meeting, an hour and a half, very intense. It was a kickoff meeting. It was kind of just everybody throwing ideas and comments, and we did a SWOT analysis, on what the school system is today. Overall impression is that it's a good school system, but I guess the problem is that they keep spending more money while enrollment keeps declining, and that's a problem.
And that's just I'd say, because I've been sort of watching and following this, and I'm curious to follow what the ultimate recommendation is. But I do think we're looking for a solution, but not addressing the primary problem, which is how do we attract new young families to Southbury and Middlebury? There's a myth that's often put out there that every new student that gets enrolled in a school costs $8,000 to the taxpayers. That ignores the fact that they also contribute to the economy and the growth of the town, and the vibrancy of the town. And the strength of our town is the intergenerational mix that we have. And if we allow that to continue to go like this, Southbury will go away in terms of who we are as a people. And I will be a very vocal voice this year, both through my work as a liaison to Region 15, but as a parent and a citizen and a member of the Board of Selectmen, to look before we just make a decision to close a building. Because I went through this in my old town, where I grew up actually, where they made a decision to close the building. 8 years later, they had to reopen that building. It cost the town millions of dollars because they went through the process of doing that and didn't take the time to really be thoughtful. I think we are being thoughtful about it. But I think we need to look at, part of the problem isn't just decreasing enrollment, but how do we attract more people to here? Listen, this is a statewide problem. There's no question of families going here. How do we make Southbury more attractive to those who do choose to stay in state, to come here? Because I came here 7 years ago, 7.5 years ago. I made a choice to come here with young kids who are now, almost almost done with high school, one going in next year. So I do think we need to address what is a core part of this problem. How do we attract more people to our town, more young families to our town?
Thank you.
I think you could expand that to say, how do we attract more young families to the state? And, my daughter and her husband are moving out because basically the economic prospects were grim.
Quite
Do
costly.
you know if they're going to look or do some sort of census on how many preschool age children there are in town right now?
It's part of the
That's part of
enrollment projection process.
So I can tell you candidly from my day-to-day that we are moving young families into town. Kids aren't in school yet in some cases. As an example, the transaction volume on single-family houses in this town jumped tremendously this year. Went from 177 in 2015 to over 220 in 2016. So that's certainly a trend that is positive.
That's great.
Can hope for that.
That's
Keep
good news.
continuing.
Well, I hope that information gets accurately calibrated into their projections.
So you don't have any realtors on that board?
There was one, believe it or not. Although I don't think she was there because she was a realtor. She just happened to be a realtor.
Isn't there a couple people from each town that don't have kids? Wasn't that part of the mix?
Yeah, I think it's a very specific mix of people. So some who are parents, some who aren't parents.
I have a list here if you
yeah.
want to see it. I mean, I brought all this stuff from the meeting.
I think it's
Yeah, I'll
fine.
check it out after.
They just piled on the paper, and I haven't had a chance to look at it all yet.
All right, do you have any other updates, sir? Mr. Bertram?
There was an IT steering committee meeting, and the good news coming out of that is that we're getting the library cable at a faster speed and a lower price.
Nice.
So,
That's good.
like anything with fiber cable, the price just keeps going down while the speed keeps going up. The manual for employee use of computer resources has been issued in a review form. We'll look at it, then give it to Tinley
Okay.
after the next meeting, I think, which I think is next week.
Great.
We did talk about police body cameras, which came up, although I didn't have the information that Arthur had, so I didn't realize how difficult that was. Yeah, we talked about the usual stuff, but isn't really that amazingly interesting, so
Okay.
I'll let it slide for now.
Anything else, George?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Justin?
Okay, economic development, we did meet since the last meeting. The most recent meeting of the agricultural subcommittee was canceled due to lack of support. They are now looking for a new chairperson to sort of reinvigorate that panel. Perhaps the most important thing to come out of the meeting was that the Economic Development Committee is going to start digging into a potential tax incentive program for the town. And they plan to spend some more time on it at their next meeting. We are one of the only towns in this area that doesn't have anything.
Right.
And certainly.
Really, one of the only towns.
Well, I mean, over the last couple of weeks, you see front page stories about what Middlebury's
Right.
program is doing for them. So certainly, in my mind, that's one of the most important things that they're working on right now. And then I think we'll hear back from them probably at our next meeting more about the banner program, not the big one across the street, but
The other bit.
The flags and
the ones on the actual poles. And they are obviously taking a bit of a leadership position on replacing some of the lighting so that we have the appropriate lumen rating for streetscape.
Right, we're at 10% now, or something?
It's really bad.
Something's good. And did they mention anything about a joint meeting with planning to talk about the banner flag?
I think they might be going to this next one.
Okay, because they were at the last one, and it was thrown around as an idea. I
Yeah.
just wondered if that was, okay. Okay.
Has planning weighed in on the lights, on the streetscape lights? The
They were all
10%?
talking about how the lumens are low.
I mean, I've heard
Talking
from-
about it, but have they,
No, they haven't.
As a panel, no. As individuals, I've heard from
yeah, no, I have too, but.
Don.
So if they're going to spearhead that, yeah, Don. Okay, Justin, anything? Well, IPOC met you, we saw that.
Yeah, IPOC met, they made a small change to the verbiage in regards to the appendix of the reserve fund, with the intention being to provide greater transparency that the guidelines for the reserve fund are being followed. The third quarter numbers were pretty good across all three of the funds, but looking into the fourth quarter, looks like everything's going to be quite a bit better. So, they did review the investment policy statements as well and decided that no changes were needed at this time.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Energy Task Force did not meet.
All right.
One of them, ask her for 5 minutes and then come here.
The-
The reserve fund.
The appendix change. Yeah.
Mr. Bucksbaum.
The library board met last night. Just a couple of things. The Friends reported that their holiday sale, which is in the library there, brought in $2,600 through December. And it's also attracted lots of donations, so they have a head start on their, books for their next sale. Technology committee pretty much talked about what George talked about with the fiber and, the change in that. And the big topic, well, I guess two other things. One was the administrative gift fund. The head librarian went through that in some great detail, and they're going to be asking for an appropriation of $175,000 out of their gift fund. And then they also discussed a service dog policy, which they agreed on, that's being sent to town council to review. So that's what happened last night.
Great, thank you. Senior Commission Planning didn't meet?
Oh, okay. Parks and Rec does not meet until January 26th and haven't met since our last meeting, but there was an exchange of emails with approval of a minor expense. For those who might be aware, at the very end of the year, we were able to lease the former temporary skating rink to New Haven. Kudos to Dustin for getting that done. But there had been discussions earlier earlier Parks and Rec meetings about providing some form of skating. Many people still skate at Hidden Pond Park, if you're not familiar with it, but I have a hockey-playing son, so I am. So we are actually going through, Dustin has been working through the process, through insurance, through legal, through the Office of First Selectman and Town Hall, on getting the appropriate approvals in place. The commission via email yesterday approved the expense of about $380 for the procurement of signs for Hidden Pond Park, and he will be working with Cindy and the office to get the final approvals through the insurance company. Yeah, through the insurance company with legal counsel review. But Hidden Pond Park will likely be a formal town skating pond this winter, assuming the weather cooperates.
Okay.
So.
Great.
So that's good news. EMS met yesterday. While I wasn't able to attend, I got an update. They meet again on February 1st, actually. They discussed the town EMS plan, but most importantly, I think they reviewed 3 proposals for the paramedic intercept provider, which would be effective July 2017. They will be discussing it again on the 1st and then coming to to this body, I believe, with a recommendation for what they believe we should be moving forward with. So
Do
in
you know
due
who the
time,
3 providers? Do you-
I do somewhere in the
okay.
back of my
It's all
head.
right.
One of them is Campion, the existing,
AMR
and Danbury.
Danbury?
Yeah. And I have all 3 copies. The Office of First Selectmen have copies of them as well, if anyone would like to see them.
Okay, great.
And Region 15's first meeting of the year is January 9th at 7:30 PM formally. So that's it.
Okay, great. George, you went to an Eagle Scout presentation.
I did.
Thank you.
I certainly did. I wasn't going to mention it, but it was, I've been to Catholic High Mass, and this lasted twice as long
Told
as in Latin, the Catholic Mass in Latin, I think so. It was very interesting. Arthur was there too. You were there the whole time, and they had great food at the end of it.
Okay.
Really wonderful buffet selection. I was really. Was that good? I didn't try that.
Yeah, these are the things we discussed.
What was the project? Do you recall?
He did benches in a garden at Danefield School. I haven't seen the project, but I imagine it's sort of like the benches. I almost wish some of the projects were a little more creative. Instead of benches and gardens, I don't know.
Those are needed, though. They're needed, and I could say
They are.
the beautification and those type of areas are public space areas. Deliver economic, help. They deliver environmental health, and they deliver social health in terms of being community gathering spots. So
This particular
I know that
scout
professionally.
troop, I think there's 4 or 5 troops in Southbury, but this particular one graduates about 50% of their kids actually reach Eagle Scout, which I thought was
50%? That's
incredible.
tremendous.
That's the real number, yeah.
That's tremendous.
Yeah, in fact, this young man's brother was an Eagle Scout just a couple of years before. Usually when they have a ceremony, they do multiple scouts at a time, but in this case, there was just the one.
Once a scout, always a scout, right, Ed? Okay, any new business to come before the board?
There was something I wanted to chat about, but I think we'll wait till Jeff's back.
Okay. So I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
No executive session. It's-
Yeah, we had one. Yeah, we haven't had an executive session.
You're welcome.
Well done, Jennifer.
I thought it was a standard practice.
The family who had